My daughter called the police and told them I was dangerous. She said I had become unpredictable. She said I was obsessed with the past. She said she was afraid I might hurt someone. And she said all of this while standing inside the house where I had raised her. I was 72 years old. I was alone. And I had never threatened my daughter in my life. But when the police arrived that afternoon, I understood something immediately. This wasn't really about fear. It was about something my daughter wanted. And she believed the police could help her get it. My name is Robert Hayes. For 42 years, I lived in the same brick house with my wife, Alina. We bought it when we were young. Back then, it seemed enormous. 3 bedrooms, a narrow staircase, a small study, a backyard with an old maple tree, and a garage that always smelled like motor oil. We didn't have much money when we moved in, but we had each other. And that was enough. Our daughter, Melissa, was 5 years old when we bought the house. She grew up there. Her height was marked on the kitchen doorway. Her first bicycle was kept in the garage. Her high school graduation photographs were taken on the front porch. When she married Daniel, we held a small family dinner in the backyard. Alina cooked for 2 days. She made too much food. She always did. For years, I thought our family was ordinary. Not perfect, but ordinary. Then Alina became sick. It started slowly. She forgot appointments. She misplaced her keys. She sometimes walked into a room and forgot why she had gone there. At first, we laughed about it. Then the doctors found something serious. The following year changed everything. I became her caregiver. I learned which medicines she needed. I learned which foods she could tolerate. I learned how to recognize the look in her eyes when she was frightened but didn't want me to know. Melissa visited. At least sometimes. But she had her own life. Her own husband. Her own problems. And slowly, I began doing everything myself. Alina passed away on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand. She squeezed my fingers once. Then she was gone. For several weeks, I barely spoke. The house felt enormous again. But this time, it wasn't because I was young. It was because half of the life inside it had disappeared. I kept Alina's photograph beside my bed. It showed her standing under the maple tree. She was smiling. She had one hand raised against the sunlight. That photograph became important later. I just didn't know how important. After Alina's funeral, Melissa started visiting more often. At first, I welcomed it. She brought groceries. She made coffee. She asked whether I had eaten. But something about her behavior changed. She began asking questions. "Dad, how much is the house worth?" I thought she was curious. I answered. Then she asked about my savings. Then my insurance. Then my will. I told her those were private matters. She became annoyed. "I'm your daughter." "I know." "Then why won't you tell me?" "Because you're asking about things that aren't yours." She didn't like that answer. Neither did Daniel. A few weeks later, he came with her. He walked through the house slowly. He opened closets. He looked at the basement. He inspected the electrical panel. I asked what he was doing. He said he was thinking about renovations. I asked why. He smiled. Just planning ahead. That phrase stayed with me. Planning ahead. I had heard it before. Usually from people who wanted something. One afternoon, Melissa brought a folder. She placed it on my dining table. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation." I laughed. "My living situation? You shouldn't be alone in this house. I've been alone for months." "That's different." "How?" "You're getting older." I looked at her. So you need help." "I have help." "Who?" "Myself." She didn't laugh. "Dad, please be serious." "I am." She sighed. Then she said something that I couldn't forget. "Mom wouldn't want you living like this." I stared at her. "Don't use your mother to pressure me." Melissa stood up. "I wasn't trying to pressure you." "You were." She laughed. 3 days later, she called me. She asked if she could come over. I said yes. She arrived with a man I had never seen before. He introduced himself as a property consultant. I immediately told him to leave. Melissa became furious. "You don't own my life." "No, but you're making decisions that affect everyone. This is my home." She pointed toward the walls. "It's Dad's house today." I looked at her. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked out. The next morning, I received a phone call from my bank. Someone had attempted to request information about my accounts. The bank refused. I asked who had made the request. They couldn't tell me. But I knew. I called Melissa. She denied it. Then she asked me a strange question. "Dad, are you keeping important documents in the house?" I said, "What documents?" She hung up. That was when I became concerned. I called Samuel Whitman. Samuel had been my accountant for 26 years. He had also helped Alina with her estate planning. I told him everything. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Robert, have you checked whether anyone has tried to access your legal records?" "No." "Do that." "Why?" "Because your wife was more cautious than you realize." I didn't understand, but I followed his advice. 2 days later, Samuel came to my house. He brought several documents. He explained that Alina had created safeguards around the estate. She had anticipated possible disputes. But there was one thing he couldn't explain. A photograph. Samuel asked me if Alina had ever shown me an old photograph of herself with a man. I said no. He looked surprised. Then he said, "That's strange." "What is?" She specifically mentioned it. I stared at him. "What did she say?" "She told me that if anything ever happened to you and Melissa challenged your right to remain in this house, you should look at the photograph in your bedroom." I laughed nervously. "What photograph?" Samuel didn't know. He said Alina had never described it, only that I would recognize it. I went upstairs. I opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside were old photographs. Most were family pictures. Melissa as a child. Alina and me at our wedding. Our first Christmas in the house. A photograph of the maple tree. Then I found one I had never noticed. It showed Alina standing beside a man. The man was older, maybe 60. He wore a dark suit. Behind them was a building. I didn't recognize it. On the back, Alina had written 6 words. "If they come, show them this." I stared at the handwriting. My hands started shaking. Who was the man? Why had Alina hidden this? And who were they? I called Samuel. He told me not to do anything yet. Keep the photograph safe. I asked why. He said, because your wife knew something. 3 days later, Melissa called the police. I was sitting in my bedroom when I heard the sound of vehicles outside. I looked through the window. 2 police cars. Then another. A 4th vehicle stopped near the curb. My neighbors came outside. I opened the front door. One officer stepped forward. Mr. Hayes. Yes. We need to speak with you. What is this about? We received a report concerning your safety and the safety of others. I looked behind him. Melissa was standing near the driveway. She was crying. Daniel stood beside her. I looked at my daughter. Melissa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The officer asked me to step outside. I said, am I under arrest? Not at this moment. Then I'd like to know why you're here. He glanced at his notes. Your daughter reported that you've become unstable. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked, what did she say I did? The officer hesitated. She said you've been acting paranoid. I looked at Melissa again. She finally looked at me. Dad, I'm trying to help you. No. She shook her head. You don't understand. I understand enough. The officer asked if he could enter the house. I allowed him inside. He walked through the hallway. Another officer followed. Melissa stayed outside. Then the first officer asked, do you have any weapons in the house? No. Are you taking medication? Yes. Any history of violence? No. He looked at me. Then he asked, is there something in your bedroom that we should know about? My heart stopped. I remembered the photograph. I said, no. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he walked upstairs. I followed. He entered my bedroom. He looked around. His eyes moved across the dresser, the bed, the nightstand. Then he saw the photograph. He stopped. Completely. He stepped closer. He picked it up. He stared at the back. Then at the front. His expression changed. Where did you get this? My wife. Your wife. Yes. He looked at me. Then he looked at the photograph again. What was her name? Elena Hayes. The officer's face became pale. He stepped toward the doorway. Everyone downstairs. His voice had changed. The other officers came up. Melissa followed them. What happened? The officer held up the photograph. Who is this man? Melissa looked at it. I don't know. I looked at her. Neither did I. Then the officer turned the photograph over. He read Elena's handwriting. If they come, show them this. He looked at me. Did your wife ever tell you about the Hayes Foundation? I shook my head. No. Melissa suddenly stepped forward. What foundation? The officer didn't answer her. He pulled out his phone. He made a call. We waited. After several minutes, another officer arrived. Then a detective. The detective examined the photograph. He asked me where I had found it. I told him. He asked when Elena died. I answered. Then he asked, did anyone know this photograph existed? I said, my daughter didn't. Melissa looked offended. Dad, why would you hide something from me? I turned toward her. I didn't know it existed. The detective looked at her. Then he asked, "Why did you call the police?" She froze. I was worried. About what? She was becoming unstable. The detective looked at me, then at her. Did he threaten you? No. Did he threaten your husband? No. Did he threaten anyone? She didn't answer. The detective asked again. No. Did he possess any weapon? No. Then why did you report him as dangerous? Melissa began crying. I was scared. The detective's voice became calm. Of what? She looked at the photograph. Then she said, "He wouldn't give me the house." Silence filled the room. I looked at my daughter. The detective looked at her too. And suddenly, everything was clear. This wasn't a welfare check. It was pressure. She had tried lawyers. She had tried property consultants. She had tried guilt. Now she had tried the police. But the photograph had changed the situation. The detective asked Samuel to come over. When Samuel arrived, he carried another folder. He looked at the photograph. Then he sighed. Elena finally decided it was time. I asked, "Time for what?" Samuel opened the folder. Inside were documents from a foundation. The Hayes Family Foundation. Elena had created it years earlier. The man in the photograph was her older brother, Thomas. He had died before I met Elena. But Thomas had left money. A lot of money. Elena had quietly used part of it to establish a fund for families caring for elderly relatives. The house was connected to the foundation through a protected trust. I stared at Samuel. Why didn't you tell me? Your wife asked me not to. Why? Because she believed Melissa might pressure you after her death. Melissa began crying. Mom thought I would do this. Samuel looked at her. She didn't accuse you. Then why? Because she understood that grief can make people make terrible decisions. Melissa sat down. I could see the anger leaving her face. What remained was fear. The detective looked at the documents. Then he looked at me. Mr. Hayes, your daughter made a serious allegation. I nodded. But there's no evidence supporting it. He turned toward Melissa. You need to understand something. She looked up. You cannot use emergency services to pressure someone into surrendering property. Melissa nodded slowly. The detective returned the photograph to me. Then he asked, "Do you want to press charges?" I looked at Melissa. She was crying. I thought about the little girl who used to run through this house. I thought about the woman she had become. And I said, "No." The detective looked surprised. You're certain? Yes. Melissa looked at me. Dad. I raised my hand. Not yet. The detective left. The officers followed. Daniel disappeared before anyone could speak to him. And Melissa remained sitting on the edge of my bed. She looked at the photograph. Why did Mom do all this? I sat down beside her. Because she loved us. That doesn't feel like love. Sometimes love is protecting someone from the consequences they aren't ready to face. She looked at me. Did she know about Daniel? I don't know. Did she know what I was planning? I don't know. But she prepared for it. Yes. Melissa covered her face. Then she said something I never expected. I thought you were going to die soon. I stared at her. She continued. Everyone kept telling me The house was worth millions. Who? Daniel. What did he tell you? That you were lonely. That you were confused. That eventually you'd need care. That if I didn't act now, everything would become complicated. I closed my eyes. And you believed him. I wanted to. That answer hurt more than any accusation. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with hatred. Sometimes it begins with someone wanting something badly enough to believe the wrong person. Melissa stayed for 3 hours. We talked. Really talked. For the first time in years. She admitted Daniel had debts. He had been trying to sell the house to cover them. She had known about some of the debts. Not all. He had convinced her that the house would eventually belong to her anyway. So she thought she was simply taking control early. I asked her, "Did you ever ask what I wanted?" She cried. No. I nodded. That was the problem. A week later, Daniel was gone. Melissa filed for separation. She stopped trying to sell the house. She also began working with a counselor. Not because I demanded it, because she finally realized she needed help. As for me, I stayed. The house remained quiet, but it didn't feel dangerous anymore. One Sunday morning, Melissa came over. She brought flowers. She placed them beside Elena's photograph. Then she said, "Mom would hate what I did." I said, "She would hate what you became for a while." Melissa looked at me. "What does that mean?" "It means she would still believe you could change." She smiled sadly. "I don't deserve you." I shook my head. "Don't make this about deserving." "Then what is it about?" "Choices." She nodded. I handed her the photograph. She held it carefully. Why did the officer recognize him? I didn't know. But Samuel later explained that Thomas had once worked with local authorities on a foundation program. The detective had seen his photograph before. That single photograph had been enough to make him question everything Melissa had reported. One image. One clue. One sentence on the back. And the entire story changed. That's the strange thing about truth. It doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in a drawer for years. Sometimes it waits until the person who needs it most is finally ready to see it. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop and look. I still think about that afternoon. The police coming through my front door. My daughter standing outside. My neighbors watching. The shame. The confusion. The anger. For a few minutes, I felt powerless. Then the officer saw the photograph. And everything changed. But here's what I learned. The photograph didn't save me. Elena's preparation didn't save me. The documents didn't save me. What saved me was refusing to become the person Melissa said I was. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I didn't retaliate. I stayed calm long enough for the truth to catch up. And maybe that's the lesson. When someone lies about you, your first instinct may be to defend yourself loudly. But sometimes, shouting only creates more noise. Sometimes the strongest response is simply, "Let's look at the facts." Because facts don't need anger. They don't need revenge. They don't need a performance. They simply need time. So let me ask you something. If your own child called the police and claimed you were dangerous because you refused to give them your home, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Would you press charges? Would you cut them out of your life completely? Or would you give them one chance to explain themselves? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Because every family is different. And sometimes the hardest decisions aren't about money or property. They're about whether the person who hurt you deserves another chance. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts. Someone reading your comment may be going through something similar. And if you enjoyed this story, please like the video. It helps these stories reach people who may need to hear them. And subscribe for more emotional family stories about betrayal, aging, forgiveness, difficult relationships, and the quiet strength that comes from experience. You never know what someone is carrying silently. You never know what battle someone is fighting behind a closed door. And you never know how much one calm conversation can change. My daughter once told the police I was dangerous. She believed I was the problem. She believed the house was worth fighting over. She believed her fear justified what she was doing. But eventually, she discovered something more valuable than the house. She discovered the truth about herself. And I discovered something too. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It doesn't mean giving someone permission to repeat their mistake. It means deciding what you want the rest of your life to look like. I wanted peace, so I chose peace. I kept my house. I kept Elena's photograph. And eventually, I kept my daughter in my life. But this time, with boundaries. Because love without boundaries can become something else. And family without respect can become a burden. Elena understood that. She had understood it long before I did. The photograph still sits beside my bed. Sometimes I look at it before I sleep. I look at Elena. I look at the man beside her. And I think about the strange way life works. She left me a house. She left me memories. She left me documents. But most importantly, she left me a lesson. Don't panic when people misunderstand you. Don't surrender because someone pressures you. Don't become cruel because someone was cruel to you. And never confuse silence with weakness. Sometimes silence is simply the space where truth is getting ready to speak. That afternoon, 4 police cars came to my house. My daughter thought they were there to remove a dangerous man. Instead, one officer saw a photograph. And that photograph opened a door nobody expected. Not a door into my past. A door into the truth. And when that door opened, my daughter finally saw me clearly. Not as an old man standing in the way of her inheritance. Not as a confused father who needed to be managed. But as the man who had spent 42 years building a home for his family. The same man who had carried her through the front door when she was 5. The same man who had stood beside her when she got married. The same man who had stayed beside her mother until the very end. And the same man who, despite everything, still loved his daughter. That was the photograph she never knew existed. And that was the truth she had forgotten. Sometimes people don't need a bigger house. They need a smaller ego. Sometimes they don't need more money. They need more honesty. And sometimes they don't need to win. They simply need to stop before they lose everything that actually matters. Melissa learned that lesson. So did I. And if there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. Protect your peace. Protect your home. Protect your boundaries. But don't let anger become your identity. Because when the truth finally arrives, you want to be able to look back and know that you remained the person you were proud to be. I did. And every night, when I see Alina's photograph beside my bed, I know she would have wanted exactly that. A calm home. a clear conscience, and a family that finally understood that love is not ownership. It is respect. And sometimes respect begins with one simple word: no.